Today, I am deeply honored to welcome my friend to the podcast. This particular episode is very special to me because I got to interview him in the United States during my visit there, and he got to show me, where he calls his home right now. Introduced me to friends and family of his and, showed me around places that we will talk about in the course of this conversation, but it really felt, very, very special. It's very special to me. So I would like to welcome my friend who is a gifted songwriter, acclaimed author, filmmaker, and storyteller whose work has consistently bridged art, faith, and community. From penning heartfelt songs to producing documentaries, hosting beloved podcasts like Empty Stage, Bridges, and Dinner Conversations, and now he's sharing his book, More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. And because of this book, we had this interview, in the church where Jimmy Carter was teaching his Sunday schools. That's so special. Andrew embodies the power of storytelling to bring people together with a heart rooted in faith and passion. With a heart rooted in faith and a passion for building community, his journey is one of music, word, and the sacred art of truly seeing people. And Andrew truly sees people. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you're not yet subscribed to our podcast, please help us by subscribing and rating this podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Enjoy this conversation. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Here in Plains, here in my hometown,
Yeah.
Southwest Georgia. Here in the church, where I go.
Where you go every Sunday. Looks like, and it feels a bit different being there, listening to the American accent and then trying to understand what people are saying and all of that. But it has been, I would say, I've learned a lot, and thanks to you, also met a lot of people and been able to talk with a lot of people also.
Okay.
But you were born and raised, in the South of America, right?
Yes, in Texas. So, which some people consider the South, some people consider the West. It depends. Texas is a big state. So it covers a lot of territory. And where I grew up was just west of a town called Fort Worth, which is a very cattle ranching, historically cowboy, kind of town. And so I grew up kind of on the beginning of the plateau of West Texas, which is very dry and very arid and that kind of Western vibe. So it wasn't until I went to college in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a part of the colonial South, is what I call that, that I realized I hadn't really grown up in the South. And then I lived in Nashville as a songwriter, as a musician for all of my adult life until a couple of years ago. And then I moved to Plains, Georgia. Of course, we'll probably talk about how I got here, but this is the deep South. This is what we call the deep South. Southern Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, that's the deep South. And so it's a very welcoming culture, as well as it has a lot of history, division, especially in racial relationships between Black and white people, which of course goes back hundreds of years to the slave trade in America. And so it has a kind of what I call like a bit of a hauntedness to it that is really charming as well, in the sense of it has a rich, deep history, and it has a struggle through that history, and it is still struggling through that history. And I think the people are doing it together, or they're living the same experience. Doesn't mean everyone is always having the same experience. Some are better than others, et cetera. But all that to say, it gives the Deep South, which is also agricultural land, lots of space. You've seen that there's not a lot. We have 500 something people here in Plains, and the next town over may have 1,000, that kind of thing. So it's very folksy. And I told you we had the Peanut Festival this past weekend, which draws in thousands of people. It's an annual festival. And I think some of us were teasing you that, that happens. That's every weekend in Plains, which is not. Many weekends in Plains, it's a trickle of a few dozen people. But anyway, so I like the spaciousness. I like the quietness. I like a bit of the hallowedness of the struggle of people trying to do life together.
Yeah, that's awesome. You talked about this struggle, and I was opportune to watch your documentary, Plain Spoken. And I, witnessed that struggle, between the Black and the white I love what one of the ladies said. She said, "They are not racists, basically. Yeah, we're all cousins." That struggle and, how Jimmy Carter, helped to, eliminate a lot of the struggle, I find it very intriguing, very inspiring, basically. But I won't us to talk about that yet. I would like us to talk about you. And, you know, when going through the application, I found out that you describe your life work as storytelling through music, through songs, through books. We'll talk about your new book also, so this with Jimmy Carter also. And so I'd just like to learn, like, what does story mean to you, and why do you think it's such a powerful way to connect people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll back up a little bit for anyone listening that Plains, Georgia is the hometown, the birthplace, the hometown, lifelong hometown of our former president, Jimmy Carter, who's the 39th president of the United States, as well as his wife, former First Lady Rosalind Carter. So that's why when you hear Jimmy Carter and us talking about Jimmy Carter, that all came from this place, this spot. This church is where he taught Sunday school for years. But as far as storytelling, to answer your question, I think the art of storytelling, what's beautiful about, I can only share truly, authentically, sincerely, I can only share my story. You can only share your story. I can't share your story for you. I can share about your story, whatever I have permission to share. You can share about my story, what you know. But the most authentic thing we can share is our story. And then how our story connects to other people's story is, I think, what creates at least the art that I've wanted to be a part of. Music and songwriting. It's been an observation of the stories that I'm connected to through my family or through friends or through community or through the story that's bearing out in my own life. It comes from very personal spaces. Same with the books I've written and now the opportunity to create documentaries. While they're not biography, the books aren't biographical about other subjects. The documentaries aren't an experience I lived in specific, but instead have observed, researched, studied. But I find connectivity within those stories in my own story. For instance, I grew up in Texas. It was predominantly, the population was predominantly white and Hispanic. So we didn't have a lot of Black influence just by the nature of the demographics of who lived there. And then, but I was always drawn to Black gospel music and I was drawn to contemporary urban music at the time. And this is in the 90s and Lauryn Hill and all these, and went to a lot of shows of Black artists where the audiences were predominantly Black. And so that part of my story, which then introduced me to the civil rights movement in America, which of course happened or began before I was born in the late 40s and the 50s and the 1960s, really, coming to an apex with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and all that energy around civil rights in America. Well, then I began to study that and became really interested in the relationship between white and Black people in America. So when I told the story of Plain Spoken, which is about race relationships in the Deep South, set in Plains, Georgia, involving Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, that was just a ton of my influences coming together that gave me maybe the credit to tell that story because I had been interested in the journey of Black and white people and also not just interested from afar, but in my own relationships with Black people, trying to understand a different perspective than my own. And then Jimmy and Rosalind have been heroes of mine for years, the way they've interacted in the world, the way they have shaped their work until the days they died, inspired by their attempt to follow Jesus. Well, I attempt to follow Jesus. And so that's part of my story. And then it all connects. So storytelling is powerful too, because it's not always about opinion. It's about observing someone's experience and then sharing that experience. So I can't tell you what your experience is. I can't tell you what your opinion is. You have to share with me. And so storytelling gives us like a more of a safe spot, a sanctuary to express things in a way where we can have conversation, where we can talk it out. Rather than, like, I don't think posting on Facebook is a form of storytelling. Now, maybe you can share, people share beautiful posts that are like writing a poem or a book or whatever. So I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but it's not in the art of conversation. Facebook is not a storytelling platform. But in the stories we can share through music and through books and film from me, for others, that's going to be through their work in the community, through their pastoring a church, whatever that is. It's the opportunity to be able to share space with other people, but for the purpose of listening and understanding and observing, not just telling. It's sharing.
Sharing.
Yeah.
Last album I listened to was Songs from the Dark. The songs you shared on it was from your own. You're trying to tell a story, basically. But one thing that I observed from your work so far is that it's all faith-based. So I'd like to learn how your faith shapes the way you create, the way you relate, and the way you live out your daily life.
Yeah. At least in America, faith-based kind of becomes a subculture or a marketing plan. And that can be wise, if you're delivering a book of sermons or delivering a book of devotionals or scriptural insights. Well, you would want to market to people who are interested in that, right? I think I am evolving and growing and expanding. I could never separate myself from my faith in general. Any conflicts I have within myself is probably driven by my faith. Now, I always want to test that out. Is that a conflict because this is challenging my followership of Jesus, or is it a conflict because the culture of Christianity where I live says that's a conflict with following Jesus? Those aren't always the same thing. And it's up to us and the Spirit in our life to bear out and to discern what is true and what is not. And we'll never do that perfectly in this context. We can try. And so I think my trying has always really been my impetus for making and creating what I create. And my faith in God, my attempt to follow Jesus has always been a part of my trying. Now, I have never been mistreated by the church in America. Some people have been really hurt by their congregants or by a pastor or by messaging from religious institutions. That's not been true for me. I can see the possibility of that happening at some point in time, but it hasn't totally been true for me. So I have found my own sanctuary within congregating and worshiping God alongside other people. But I do think culturally in America, we're in a strange place, and maybe always have been, with Christianity and the representation of Christianity. If really the representation of Christianity should be the representation of Jesus. Yeah. We're little Christ, that's what Jimmy Carter always said. Remember, we're little Christs. And so I have found some of that messaging somewhat troublesome. Some of the current messaging that is intended to represent the Christian church here in America and more modern America, and really even just more troublesome in the last 5 to 7 years. So I'm finding that I want my work to more broadly represent or to more purely represent. And therefore it may no longer totally be in the faith-based market, if you will. It will always be driven by my faith. I will always see story through the lens of that of that in every life there is a story of God bearing itself out in that person. So I'll never be able to disconnect from that. But I do want people to be able to approach it from all walks of life, from all religious backgrounds or any religious background. I don't want subjects to just be people who are making a living in a faith-based or church circle, which I have no problem with that. That's just what I feel more an expansion within me of wanting me to do through all the series that I've hosted in the past, podcast and streaming series. And those have largely invited people in the faith space as guests. I want to expand beyond that and still have people who are very involved in faith circles as a profession on those shows or as a part of my projects, but that not be the purpose. And really, to be honest, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter were part of the inspiration for that expansion within me, because they never derived their income from being a minister in a particular church or from being a speaker in the Christian conference circle or whatever. And they probably could have been, because their Christian faith was so well known and so much a part of, they were so vocal about it. But their work continued to serve all people that they could get their hands on, and that was, I believe, inspired by their Christian faith, which I think is what resulted in such powerful or achieved such powerful results and impactful results. So, that's been an inspiration to me to watch that and to go, wow, to have such, I guess impact is the right word, but not for achievement purposes, but just to make a difference in the public square, influenced and driven and inspired by your faith, but in the public square. So I very much hope that that's true for the next half of my life, So yes, faith always inspires me. Yes, my past projects and creations have been, I think even I would say probably largely for the faith-based market. It's nice, maybe ironic or appropriate that Jimmy's brand, if you will, or his work and my highlighting that through Plain Spoken, that documentary for PBS, or More Than a President Sundays with Jimmy Carter, even though those are his Sunday school lessons, he was not. It's a secular publisher, and there will be people who do not espouse the Christian faith at all that will, because of their appreciation of him or fascination of him. So in some ways, he's helped introduce me into helped give me my foray into my first not explicitly faith-based product. Yeah. I just thought about that now.
I mean, when you were talking about that and talking about, your works and, you talked about the podcast that you've hosted in the past and you had this, having guests on empty stages, basically. I've forgotten the name. It's skipping my head. What do you call it?
Yeah. The show on Caleb on Demand is Empty Stage.
Empty Stage, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just remembered, I told you this already, like I got to know about you first on Instagram because of Sister Winers, because you're on Empty Stage.
The queen. Yeah, Cece, yeah.
Yeah, Cece. And so I was like, okay, based on, regardless of it being faith-based or not faith-based, whatnot, there's something that, inspires us into your work or into other people's work. And it doesn't matter if it is faith-based or not faith-based. The content is what matters. They edify people's life. Let's help them through what they are going through at the moment in their lives. And I believe from what I've seen from your work, removing the church from it still helps people, through whatever life they're going through.
Thank you. I mean, I still truly believe that at the heart of Christianity is, I guess, like the great rescue. It's the North Star, I guess. And so I remember being in Israel 10 years ago now, and my dear friend Jenny Owens, who's a wonderful singer-songwriter up in New York, she and I were leading a trip with our friend, another Andrew, who was really organizing and leading the trip as a travel guide. And we were there to provide music at night and to have conversations with people about a book we had read together. Anyway, our guide on the ground, was named Kobe, I think. I'm forgetting his name right second, but he was a great guy, an Israeli man. He had all his degrees were in essentially these world religions so that he could be a part of the tourism industry. It's what his passion was. Anyway, one of the women on the trip, she asked him, and we all just fell in love with him. He was just an awesome guy, and he just was so fun. And one of the women said, do you have a religious faith? He did not, which was really interesting considering he's in the hotbed of religions and he's teaching us about all these places and he's very well acquainted with all the religions. He had to study them closely, the history of them, to be able to be good at his job. She said, well, if you had to espouse one, which one would it be? We totally expect in that culture where we were for that to be potentially Islam, just the popularity, et cetera, of it, and probably the influence of it in that culture. And he said it'd be Christianity. And we were like, really? And to a bunch of Americans, we thought that this is different. And she said, why? And he said, from my kind of academic approach to the religions, if you take everything away, he said, people will always take aspects of religion and twist and contort them for control, for manipulation. That's not just true of Christianity. That's true in every religion. People use religion, human beings, in their unhealth, use religion to control, oppress, whatever. He said, but if you take all that away and just look at the religion and look at the leaders of the religion and look at what the heartbeat of the religion is, he said, Christianity is the only one about love. And I don't know if someone who is a Muslim would agree with me about that. I'm not well acquainted with Islam. I'm not well acquainted with Buddhists, so I would have to have that conversation wider. But from his opinion, he said, the heart of it is love God and love one another, no matter how we taint that. And it didn't give me confidence, I wouldn't say. It just reminded me, that from what I understand, from my perspective, from my belief, love And I believe love is perfectly represented in Jesus. Again, it's the anchor. It's the center, of everything. And therefore, however people encounter my work, hopefully they encounter that, regardless of who I'm talking to and what I'm talking to them about. So you're right. The content is the point, and no matter where I go with that, no matter what place I'm in or who I'm with, that content will naturally come out of me, I think.
God is love, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to know if your parents influenced this in some ways, because I know your dad's a therapist and your mom's an organist, and you play in the choir, you play keyboard, you make music. You have these conversations through your productions and documentaries, and the way you speak also, you notice, this guy is, maybe he has a foundation or a background in therapy, or the way you converse with people or relate with other people that I've physically, personally observed also in church here and in the community. So I'd just like to know how your parents influenced the foundation of who you are today.
I can't separate anything. I mean, I'm my own person. My parents encouraged my brothers and me to be our own persons. They weren't interested in shaping mini me's, but or at least how I perceive our upbringing. But I can't really look at my foundation and not find my parents. So I think, how did they influence me? I mean, in what ways? I can't figure out a way they didn't. But when you were asking the question, I thought for the first time, my parents, they were so involved in the church. I just have always thought of them as people of faith, and they are. But their individual careers were not necessarily solely based in the church. Now, my dad was a therapist, but it was a pastoral counseling center, meaning that, or this is what I understand, is that it was really a Christian worldview was informing even his practical advice. He was not evangelizing people. People of all different faiths came to his practice to be counseled and to be helped through their problems. Yeah. But that my dad and the other counselors, I think it would assume in his practice, were informed by the healthy standards of, I guess, a Christian lifestyle or a lifestyle that is trying to follow Jesus. Again, I've gone I've had 2 counselors in my therapy life, and both have been Christians. We rarely talk about Jesus or God, or can, if that's what I want to talk about. We talk about very practical things, what I'm struggling with, what I need help with, what are some healthy steps to take to try to correct some things, or challenging my thoughts and beliefs about things. But it's not a Bible study, right? It better not be, for as much as it costs. And so I think my dad's faith, just like we've been talking about, influenced his own work, even though he was helping people very much on the ground level of their problems. So I think his influence was a non-judgment. I think it was my mom that told me one time that she learned how to love people through my dad.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's hard for me to see my mother ever as unloving, and I don't think that was the case. I think my mother has always been loving. I think what she meant, or what I heard, and that was that maybe she learned not to be as critical maybe of people as she maybe could be, or to loosen a grip on some of maybe her preconceived ideas or judgments, maybe. I'd have to ask her. My dad, but he certainly taught my brothers and me that. And I think my mom did too, but my dad I understood later, because my dad worked in a small community like what I live in now, not quite as small, that he was counseling people who he knew. That's a heavy burden. People I knew, people my mother knew, people they went to church with, people that I went to school with. That's a real heavy burden in a small community. My dad, in my perspective, did it beautifully. So I think that teaches you, automatically you start to realize that people are the same and they're all equal, and problems are problems, conflicts are conflicts, but there's no room for judgment. So I think my parents taught me to drop the gavel, and that's not my place. And then all kinds of other influences. My mother, of course, a musician. She directly influenced me as a musician. And then she became a music educator in our school system for 20 years when she was about my age, till she was in her mid-60s, and had kind of a whole second career that was beautiful. And she still always played the organ. and still does. But she loved those students, and that was not something she had never done before. She had the degrees, but never done it. So they also have taught me like kind of a sense of adventure, or a sense of you don't have to do the same thing forever, or you can be inspired in a new way and move with your inspiration responsibly, you know? So
That's wonderful. I mean, that's a strong foundation to have, and
yeah.
still have right now.
Oh yeah, I'm so thrilled to have. Yeah, my mom texted me one day, and she said something to the effect of, you know, I'm glad to be your friend.
That's very beautiful.
It is, yeah. And of course, I feel exactly the same. That's not one-sided at all. And so I think that gift, it'll carry with me the rest of my life long after they're gone.
I wanted to ask that question because, getting to know you so far, I know how important your parents are to you. And I see, from what we've shared so far, how you converse with them, discuss with them, and, spending time with them. And you've been like friends, I find that very, very wonderful. And, them doing what they do right now and you doing what you're doing right now. I was seeing like very, very, I was seeing like thick lines basically, or connections basically in what you do and what they have been doing so far. So that's why I wanted to find out what that was like, being their child or be their friend right now. So I'd like to also go back a little bit to Plain Spoken. So you got to learn about Jimmy Carter, what he does. You came to Plains to do the documentary. You did the documentary. A lot of people will, sign off on that and move on with their lives to the next thing. But you, Andrew, decided to move to Plains.
I know.
How was that like for you? Moving to Plains in your 40s, changing environment, changing community. How was that like embracing that big change?
Yeah, unexpected. It wasn't forced at all, which I can have a part of my personality can be one to get things done, which can mean forcing some things sometimes. And this just was not forced at all. So again, it feels like receiving a gift when it's not forced. And I was, we filmed for a couple years at least. I've researched before that even, I'd been in town before that. But when we started filming in 2020 through 2022, when we got done filming, I realized I would miss my friends, my new friends in Plains. And it didn't feel like new friends at all. Felt like we had always known each other, at least to me. And so I started looking. There was a little small house for sale here. And I thought I would just I was able to afford it and thought I could just redo it slowly. It was an older house and have a place I could come anytime I wanted. I could be in Plains whenever I wanted, and other people could use it too. I love people in and out of my house. So I did that for a couple of years, and then my friends in my community and family in Nashville, where I've lived, where I thought I would live till the day I died, they're the ones who said, "Why don't you experiment with living in Plains for a year?" They could just see it in me, and I wasn't wanting to leave Plains, at least as far as leaving home. And I tested out for a year, rented my place out in Tennessee, so I couldn't go back. And like 2 or 3 months into that situation, I was like, "Well, yeah, and so when my tenant's lease was up, I sold that house and moved down here permanently and became a Georgian. And yeah, there's always a little fear in it that it's fear of myself. It's not fear of anybody here in Plains, or it's fear of me not knowing myself enough. Am I making the right decision? Am I going to get, I've never felt that way. I never felt, oh my goodness, did I do the wrong thing? I mean, it's a significant difference coming from Nashville's a very metropolitan city now to a town of 500 something people. But I have felt more myself, more connected with myself. And I think that goes back to my upbringing and all that. Now, I am starting another documentary in January. Yeah. And a lot of my friends have said, we're just going to move there. But it's in Baltimore. It's around Rockville, Maryland is what it's based out of. I'm not moving to Maryland. And I don't think that. I think this was just a combination of people and place we find our souls are at rest. He said, we only find that if we're lucky a couple times in life. When we find it, we must go. So yeah, I had to go. And I hope they'll receive me for as the rest of my life. I hope I do. These people feel like family, this community. So I know I will make mistakes, and I know I will hurt somebody at some point, and will be hurt myself by somebody. That's all a part of relationship. I just hope I do them proud. I hope they are glad that guy moved here.
I'm sure they're proud that you moved to.
I hope so. Yeah.
Because I mean,
I don't want to take a survey yet.
I've been here since I mean we're recording on Monday.
Uh-huh.
It's Monday and I've been here since Friday. Everyone's just like saying Andrew this, Andrew that, and Andrew Greer. And being in church on Sunday yesterday also, everyone knows Andrew, and you have to do a lot of things around here. I mean, I feel like sometimes I feel like you've been here for like 10 years or 20 years,
Well,
so you're
that's
so integrated into the system.
yeah.
And I think last night when we were coming back from the Mexican restaurant, I was just asking myself, reflecting a little bit, or sitting at the back and watching all of you or listening to everyone speak. And I was like, I think I kind of understand why Andrew moved here right now because the warmth you feel from the people, like they don't let you feel like you are not from the community, or they don't even. For me, my skin color, nothing like it, nothing. We went to a Mexican restaurant, a group of I think we were 6 of us,
Yeah.
and I was the only black person,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't feel out of place for any reason. Just the warmth you feel like from the people, the love, and you feel that love from them. I think
Yes, what you feel is what I feel. I feel lucky.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled that's your takeaway. I love having people visit, and people from different walks of my life love coming to visit. It's just such a unique place. And it's been cool to see. It's been cool to see my friends here in action. The same way they invited me in, I see them inviting my friends, and it just makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's a big gift out there. It's not something you get everywhere in the world.
I would agree.
So I'd like us to talk about your book, More Than a President, the latest book. And, it covers the Sunday school sermons from Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter. So I'd just like you to, tell us about the inspiration behind you, doing the research, doing the work, to put everything in the book. What can we learn from I'll combine it also with plain spoken. I watched what Jimmy Carter was doing, President Jimmy Carter was doing in the community service and, humanity also and community. So I don't know if you could combine all of that.
Yeah. Well, first I would say I'm just so deeply honored that I got to steward these. I'm newer to the community. I'm newer to the legacy. I can think of, a dozen other people that could have done it just as well and had more lived experience than I had with the subject matter. And so feel very honored that I would get to occupy this space and again, hope to do people proud. The Sunday school lessons, so President Carter taught Sunday school, essentially Bible study, in this church that we're in, Maranatha Baptist Church, for essentially 40 years once he came home from the White House in early 1981. Whoever wanted to come. From what I understand, they never advertised it. It was just a grassroots swell. And over time, people started learning about it. They did start letting people know what dates he would be here to teach. But he taught on average, I think, half the Sundays each year. And of course, if you know about President Carter's life post his presidency, became what I would say he and Rosen became some of the greatest humanitarians in the last 50 years through their work with their nonprofit, the Carter Center, which works to eliminate disease. It works to mediate peace with conflicting nations and communities. And it also works to essentially host or infrastructure democratic elections, free and fair elections for countries that formerly under dictatorships, et cetera, which is a very dicey work. I mean, they did, and the Carter Center is doing hard work that is not always successful, which I think is part of being a part of successful work, is doing the hard work, regardless of winning or failing. All that to say, his Sunday school lessons brought him, I feel like, back home, in that, from what I understand, he taught Sunday school from his early life while he was in the Navy, after he came home from the Navy to become a peanut farmer and to reconnect with the community he grew up in, taught Sunday school. When he was president of the United States, he taught Sunday school at the church that he and Rosen went to at First Baptist Church, the city of Washington, D.C. I think the Sunday school teacher of their couples class that they were just attending asked if he would substitute occasionally, and he said, sure. And luckily someone had the wherewithal to record most of those. So in this book, I listened through literally hundreds of lessons. They're really well archived at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library in Atlanta. We, of course, have archives of them here, some of them in church. That's where I first discovered, like, oh, we have a lot of these archives, and they've not really been heard or read or seen in different ways. They've been exploited, well, in some small ways. Like there was a collection of them that came out on CD about 20 years ago. There was a devotional book where they really reduced the lessons to just bite-sized chunks about 15 years ago. But I realized that his lessons kind of in full, which were really meaty because of his experience in the world, throughout the world, including the regions where the Bible takes place. I mean, he mediated the only successful peace agreement between Israel and Arab nations with the Camp David peace accords in the 70s. And that was very much inspired by his faith, which inspired his love of the Israel and the Palestinian, the Arab nations, because that's where our faith began, in the sense of the lives where the life of Jesus took place. And so all of that gives such weight to his words and the lessons. It's not just going through the scriptures, but then when he goes through the scriptures and his insights about the scriptures from a historical perspective, but then also from his lived experience of trying to follow Jesus. It's just profound. And also to think in our American culture, a president of the United States faithfully taught Sunday school, faithfully held to a moral code, that had integrity and character in it, was married to a woman for 77 years faithfully. And I guarantee you that faithful part of that was a part of his understanding of following Jesus and her understanding of following Jesus. I'm sure it's not easy to be married 77 years. I would have no idea, not even one, so all of that life experience comes into these lessons. And so then I picked some of what I felt like would translate to the page the best, because he delivered them as an oral lesson. Yeah. And so that's kind of how do they translate to the page? He wasn't writing them out on his typewriter, his computer, or anything like that. So I picked what I felt like were the best couple in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and then the last year was 2019 that he taught. And so it's a collection, and you see some of his own evolution and his spiritual beliefs and thoughts and perspectives and understandings. But we tried hard, the publisher and I, not to over-edit them. So I wrote introductions to each decade to give a context of here's what Carter was doing, here's where he was at in his life, here's a snippet, a snapshot that would then kind of help framework these lessons that he taught during that era. But then he asked for lots of feedback from the congregation. He expected them to respond from the pews. They were not rhetorical questions. So we really wanted to include all of that, which creates a book that's not as simply or even refined in its appearance, in that it's here's a nice paragraph, here's a nice paragraph, here's a nice paragraph, here's a break, here's a nice. It really is him dialoguing with the people in the room, thinking through his thoughts as he is teaching the lesson, which is what a good Sunday school or any educator does, is he thinks through it and he listens to the responses of his class. And so you get all of that in it. And it was really hard for me. I'm a little bit perfectionist with words. I really like things to lay out on the page really beautifully. And I think in the end it does lay out beautifully. But my publisher was like, let it breathe. He said, let it live. His words in this way. It's okay if he said a kind of slang word, like an appropriate slang word, like a y'all or instead of have to, got to, kind of thing. That's okay. That's him speaking just to people conversationally. So what you get is these conversations that President Carter was having with his class members over 40 years or more. And anyway, I'm just floored that they're there. It's his first words to be published posthumously. He passed away last December. Yeah. And he wrote very prolifically in his lifetime. So to also get to steward a book of his words, I don't know. It feels like, in a lot of ways, I don't know that I even know it's true yet. It still feels too good to be true. So I hope it's not. I hope I don't wake up.
Yeah. So I guess it's a wonderful thing to be able to be in that position, to place everything in the book for people to read, to experience also through the pages of the book also.
Yeah.
I was flipping through the book, I think some days ago. I think twice now already, flipping through the book. Big book actually, filled with a lot of messages that one could also apply to one's personal life, And what you said about him engaging the congregation reminded me of what I saw when watching the documentary, Plain Spoken. Kim was making a comment about, so whenever she takes the Sunday school, when he's not taking Sunday school, she's always like looking forward to his, feedback. Yeah.
Or criticism.
Or criticism. And this particular time, she said um, President Carter called her, but she was not available. She was busy with some other things. Then I think he sent a text and said, please, whenever you are taking Sunday school, I'm paraphrasing right now, ensure that the congregation gets a microphone, basically. And, I just remember that right now because you said he really engaged the congregation. So it was important for him for President Carter to get the feedback of the congregation, make them feel heard, to listen to them also, and not just listen to them, but to make them very audible as much as possible.
Yeah, to get what are your thoughts, or to be open to new ideas.
Yeah.
One of our assistant director and director of photography for the film for Plain Spoken has his seminary degree and really loves scripture. And so we agreed that I would lead worship on Sundays to give the musicians here Sunday off. This was before I lived here and was a member here. And he agreed to teach Sunday school for Kim, so she wouldn't have to teach at that time. President Carter and Mrs. Carter were still very much attending, but they were in their later years of their life, and Kim was teaching most Sundays. And so Chris taught, and he taught, I don't remember what the scripture passage was, and he taught on, but President Carter was talking to him afterwards about how he had gained some new insights from Chris's teaching and his understanding of it. And I thought, how cool this man at 96, 97, still interested, in someone. You could easily be dismissive at that age of life and experience and go, what does a 30-something know about the Bible compared to me, But instead go, I still have things to learn, ways to grow. He often said in his lessons, stretch your mind. He felt like the opportunity of following Jesus and then applying scripture to our lives or understanding scripture as we get to know Jesus through scripture, that it was to stretch our minds, stretch our hearts, challenge our preconceived ideas and beliefs. And I think God being big and mystical, he's a mystery and he's eternal. And we are too, but to think that we'll never get to the bottom of him, I think that's what President Carter did well from my own intake. His lessons was saying stretch. And really, I don't think we can ever stretch wide enough. God's too big.
That's too big, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me, from my understanding right now, from people that are great, people that have achieved so much in their lives, I believe they embrace the fact that we are not perfect and we are all work in progress. And no matter how much they know, how much they've accumulated in life in terms of knowledge, there's always more to learn. There's always more to explore. There's always the opportunity to unlearn, to relearn, and to learn new things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful thing.
Yes.
It's attractive,
That makes life beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you say is the core message you want people to take from this book when they pick up more than a president? Would they learn how to become a president, or what do you want to lead Sunday schools?
No, neither. I hope the takeaway is a couple of the themes that seem to resonate throughout his teaching, even as he evolved or expanded in some of his understanding of different parts of the Bible. I think the theme was always, I had two takeaways. And one is truly love your neighbor, which means to see them as equals, to uphold them as equals, to the rights of humans or the rights of everybody, not just ourselves. And so love, that real true Jesus-like love, which is service-oriented. So I think you see a lot of that in his lessons as a takeaway, but also a real lack of judgment or a desire to set our judgments aside. There's a couple lessons that I included from Jonah when he went all the way through Jonah, which is only 4 chapters. But, it was kind of either I'd forgotten or came back to remembering that Jonah did not want to deliver an opportunity for repentance and connection with God to a people he did not like. He did not feel were worthy of God's second chances, essentially. That was only for his people. That was only for God's chosen people. That was only for the Hebrew people, the Israelis, And so Israelites. So I loved when he probed that message to go, all of us will struggle with our biases, our prejudices. We will think God reserves his best for me who is worthy and that someone else is not as worthy of that same redemptive love, compassion, mercy, grace. And yet we will be called to deliver it sometimes to the same people who are enemies. I think there was a fear of the Ninevites of being enemies of the Israelites, which at times they were throughout history. So I guess I get it. To some degree, I'm like, well, okay, maybe he's just being protective of his people, of his identity. God is very specific in what he asked. Therefore, he was prioritizing maybe his protection, his entitlement over God's call. And I think about we as Americans and then Christians in America. Do we want to protect our way of life at all cost? And is that numbing or muting the call of God maybe to set the table with Jesus in the presence of my enemies?
That's a deep word.
Yeah. So I think President Carter really seems through his lessons, and I think his life, wanted to be a part of setting that table, setting a place at the table for others in the example of Jesus.
We had a good time in between working chores, in the yard, around the barn, and in the fields and streams. As a boy, I was an avid reader, as was my mother. It was reading books that opened my eyes to the world that I didn't yet know as a boy. I don't think there's any way to explain my life, or to explain Rosen's life, or to explain our advancement after school without understanding the Plains High School and what it meant. Every Friday we had a debate. The advanced debaters, went on to the district meets, sometimes the state tournament. So we had a constant, stimulating, academic, intellectual life. He's still teaching Sunday school class at 95, and he's doing it not just for the church, but he's doing it for the town. I have much respect for him. Incredible person.
One thing I find very inspiring about his life is, in the church, you involved everyone. And I guess a lot of people see that in your book, also from the sermons that you preached during the Sunday schools. And from the video, from documentary, Glenn spoken also, you see that he was invited. Even the pastor at the moment was a black pastor. I found out very, very, outstanding, And also what he did in the community of integrating the black community and the white community. I would like everyone to get the book, to read the book, but also understand that the 39th president of the United States, President Jimmy Carter, was not just a Christian in church and something else outside, but he lived actually what he preached. And during the Sunday schools also, like he really, and I think that's one thing I want for my own life, to learn more from, not just to read the Bible and understand the Bible and try to be what is in the Bible, but also to, in my outside world, be that also, apply the words of the Bible into my everyday life also. Yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter how difficult it might be, to be, much more loving, much more inviting, embracing people around me, trying to fight for changes in the community, trying to see how I could spread more of God's love, around me.
Mhm. Yeah, and that no matter what positions we hold, we're never above or exempt from serving others and testing our own thoughts, our own intentions, out of humility and service to others. I think that is one of the beautiful portraits of President Carter, is that he did at one time, arguably hold the most powerful position in the world, and yet continued to weigh and test and his own heart, his own motives, to humble himself before others.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful example to see another human being do that, who has achieved the heights of success in human, man-made terms. But it goes back to, the example of Jesus is he emptied himself, right? So I guess that's our ultimate calling.
Sure. So, Andrew, from your music and documentaries and work that you do out there, what would you want the listeners, to hold on to, basically, from everything that you do?
I think the same thing we just discussed about from the More Than a President book and from the lessons, that we can't get to the bottom of God. So our eternal opportunity is to just get to know more and more and more, and to then embody more and more and more, and I think that'll, get us back to the Eden we were created to be in. So I hope my work has like tastes of, I guess, of how it was all supposed to be, and like, even if it's a portrait of the struggle to get there. that there's something holy in that for us humans to struggle through, press on, press forward, move through. And yeah, so I think that would be beautiful if people were like, I think I saw in that a sign of who we can be. And that would be a good thing.
Good thing, yeah. So for people out there who, like to connect with you more, maybe ask more questions that we could not ask in this conversation, maybe, reach out, get the book also.
Sure.
Or, you're on tour also.
Right. Yeah.
To get to know how your tour.
Yeah, if you're in the States, you can go to my website. You can just Google my name, Andrew Greer. It'll go to andrew-greer.com. And there are all the tour dates and stuff with music and with book and all that kind of thing, which in some ways I hope to do less of. So catch me while you can. But the book is available everywhere. So wherever you buy the book, Amazon, etc. Or you can go to sundayswithjimmycarter.com or you can go to my website and find a link there too. So it's super easy to find these things and engage with it however is best for you. And the book is available in a physical format, which I recommend because the photos and everything, but it will also be available in an ebook format too. And then eventually in an audio format. But we're going to use President Carter's actual words that were in the book. And so that's going to take a little fashioning just to sync it up with the book as best as possible.
That'll be wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll place the link to your website in the show notes of this episode. So I encourage everyone out there who's listening to just, click on the link, copy the link, reach out to you, get your book. It's going to be available on Amazon from the 1st of October.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess this episode will be out after that.
So you'll be good.
Cool. And if anyone is in the US, the person could just attend your tour, maybe reach out to you to get the book signing or something. Yeah. That'll be great. Before I let you go, I'd like you to play something for us.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, but
use me. Lay me down in the red dirt clay, 'neath the arm of Mary's song. Hear that train car roll and moan along the lines in the fields of home. The ease and bend of a stitch and dim hands along the wither of my old friend. Every trot and lope, every step he knows, young and free in the fields of home. Let the day fade out on me, to the night spill all my dreams. In this earth rest these bones, lay me down in the fields of home. His old hands have known this land, and I have known him strong and kind. From these blooms we have bloomed and grown in the love in the fields of home. Let the day fade out on me, to the night spill all my dreams. In this earth rest these bones, lay me down in the fields of home. Oh, 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 lay me down in the fields of home. If I go before I wake, let the ground here sing my memory. In the distant sky, hear love's longing cry. Call me on to the fields of home. Call me out to the fields of home.
So, thank you so much.
I hope you want them to hear you clapping.
Yeah, let's. That's officially an podcast recording. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for spending time in Plains too. Special to do conversations like this here. Every time I had the opportunity to speak with President Carter, and I think this is the tone of the people here too, and it's now my tone too. He would always say, "You're always welcome," and that's true for you too.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you very much.